Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to 2020's last webinar with EZMed. What an incredible journey this has been. I think we all started very, very nervously about 6 months ago, pretty much to the day. I think it was on the 21st of May when we did our first webinar. And we're really so pleased that you could all join on this incredible journey with us and that you're still joining us week by week by week. And we're very, very humbled to have so many of us, of the attendees with us joining every single week. The EZMed, the ProfNet and the SpaceNet teams really hope that you found all the topics very interesting and that you truly found some value in the discussions that we had during our webinar sessions. We will definitely keep you posted with regards to the webinars that we will be doing in 2021. So please just keep a lookout for those on any of our social media platforms, including our website, ezmed.solutions. But today we're broadcasting live from Centurion again, and we're joined by two special guests. I think both the ladies found themselves in Cape Town, and I think Wendy, who's orchestrating everything behind the scenes, is actually at a client's office in Durban. So we scattered across South Africa, but thank goodness for digital platforms. I think that's one positive thing that came out of COVID. And we're lucky enough to be joined on a digital platform again. And I can tell you, you are virtually joined by 19 different disciplines today. I think there's close to 500 people that registered, and I would just like to share some of the stats with you with regards to the specific disciplines. A lot of psychologists, again, there's close to 150. We've got just over 70 physiotherapists. There's 41 occupational therapists, about 30 biokineticists, 32 speech therapists and audiologists. We've got 20 dietitians, 28 registered counselors, 20 podiatrists, 28 medical orthotists and prosthetists. There's 9 social workers and chiropractors. There's 28 optometrists and a handful of doctors as well. And then a handful of other disciplines, hearing aid acousticians, art therapists, etc., etc. So a very, very warm welcome to you all. While everyone is still settling in, and I see the numbers are rising, just a huge thank you to the SpaceNet Global Group, ProfNet Medical, and the practice management system called EZMed for sponsoring this, all the webinars, and especially today's webinar again. Really, without these companies and the product, none of this would be possible. So thank you very much, SpaceNet Global Group. Attendees, just a reminder that all our previous webinars, including today's, is available on different platforms to go and view or just to go and listen. I'm posting that in the Q&A or in the chat functionality rather now for you, so that you can literally just copy and paste those links and you can go and listen or watch in your own time. Talking about webinars that you can go and watch, and this sort of ties in with today's webinar. One that you really need to watch was a really good introduction, and we did state in the invitations that you need to try and watch this one, was the one that we did on the 15th of October, how to market your practice and sort of grow it ethically. But today, we've got two special people joining us together with Dion, and we're going to try and answer the question, what do your healthcare practice, Apple and Disney have in common? And here joining us today is Kaz Henderson and Nicola Probin. So Kaz, first of all, is the founder and director of Possibilities. Don't you just love that title? Of Network Communications, a marketing and communications company. Now, Kaz has more than 30 years experience in this sector with probably one of the most colorful and interesting biographies you can imagine. And Nicola is a brand and marketing partner also for Networks Communications and extremely brand focused and a true champion for the clients that she works with, including us. So between these, both of these ladies, they've done incredible work with big international companies as well as with local companies. And I would just like to say it's such a privilege having you both on our webinar today. We've worked closely together for the past 6 months. And I can really tell everyone attending here that these two don't hold back. They call a spade, but they also support you every single step of the way when it comes to strategically designing a marketing campaign for today and for the future. Kaz, Nicola, welcome, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much, Ronnie and Dion. Thank you.
Also joining us is our very own Dion Beach. You know him as the Director of ProfNet Medical and the SpaceNet Global Group Executive for Operation. Dion, I think you were literally on pretty much every single webinar since we started back in May. And thank you so much for sparing your time and sharing your valuable time and all your knowledge with us, and just having very truthful and open and honest conversations on all the webinars so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Lonnie. Thank you very much. And hi, Kaz. Hi, Nicola. Thanks so much for joining us, and hello to everyone. This is our last for the year, but definitely not our last webinar. So we look forward to welcome you all back in the new year as well, and with some fresh topics and content. But thanks, Lonnie, and thanks for anchoring and driving and leading us through the last 29, I think it was.
29.
Yeah, thank you very much, Lonnie. Yeah.
That's a pleasure, Dion. I think everyone know my name. My name is Lani Ace. I'm a product manager with the SpaceNet Global Group, and I will be your host for this afternoon. Attendees, while you're busy joining, just remember you can use the chat functionality or the Q&A functionality. We will all try and keep a close eye on your questions and try and answer them during the afternoon. Also, just a reminder that today's discussion will be fairly broad, but we will try and keep it within the guidelines of the regulator, the HPCSA. But should you wish to discuss any of your practice's unique requirements, we would advise you to go and talk to an appropriate advisor. And always remember just to act within your regulator, whether that is the HPCSA, the AHPCSA, SANC, etc., etc. But I think we can get started. I see people are still coming in, but I need to keep an eye on the clock as well. Kaz, you know what, ever since you came up with the title for today's webinar, what does your healthcare practice, Apple, and Disney have in common? The only thing I could think about was forbidden fruit, a mouse, and I've got no idea how that fits in with a healthcare practice. So perhaps you can explain it to me and to the attendees today.
Hi, Lonnie. Hello, everyone. Well, it's actually quite simple, because what all three of those have in common is the fact that Apple is a brand, so is Disney a brand, and so is your healthcare practice. You are all brands. What's so beautiful about Disney and Apple is they're two completely different brands, but you know exactly what they are. So you know the look of it, you know what they do, what they represent. And I think that's part of what we're going to try and tackle today is, what does your brand say about you? So that's what everything has in common. They're all brands. That makes sense? That makes sense?
It does make sense. It does. But would you say it's important for your healthcare practice to have a brand?
Yes, I think so. I think a healthcare practice is a business. And in fact, that's also one of the webinars that EZMed covered this past 6 months. So as a business, and if you want to attract and retain your clientele, your customers, because your patients are your customers, then yeah, it's important to have a brand, and particularly now because it is such a competitive space. So it's not just the fact that you are these amazing healthcare professionals dispensing incredible care and skills and your services, you are also running a business, which has again been covered. So standing out is kind of critical to you too, for your own healthcare. And when I say healthcare, I mean the healthcare or the health of your brand. So yeah.
Lonnie, I see Nicola wants to say something. I'll give you a chance.
I get very passionate about branding, so yeah, I could go on for hours about this, but just to add what Kaz was saying, we were thinking about these iconic brands, Apple and Disney, and as a consumer, you experience them in different ways, you know, sometimes every day of your life, sometimes just occasionally. But the thing is that they have developed very powerful brands from the inside out, spent millions and millions of dollars on protecting that brand, developing it, defining it. It's a real asset. And what Kaz and I want to unpack with you guys today is that you can do the same for your practice. Obviously not on that scale, but the same principles apply. You know, the power of a brand can really, in our opinion, elevate your brand. It can help define your practice and what you are and who you are and what you do. It's, you know, people say to me, what do you think a brand is? A brand is everything. A brand is what a brand does. So it's not just the look of your logo or what your website looks like. It's absolutely everything. And I hope today we can sort of start to unpeel some of those layers of the onion for you.
Sure.
Perfect. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Nicola. I think we often hear healthcare practitioners saying, but you know, what brand can I really build? You know, I'll use myself as an example. I'm a physiotherapist. My practice's name is Burrs Physiotherapy, or physiotherapist is what it should be. And you know, who's going to remember that surname? It's difficult to remember. It's difficult to spell. You know, how am I going to be building that, and how can I actually make that into a brand? And I think, firstly, if we use the contra to that, if somebody defames you or puts rumors out into the market, we're very quickly putting our hands up saying, you're ruining my name. So by doing that, we're saying, I cherish my name and the name that's out there in the market, where people are saying, you know, you got to go to Dion or to Bur's physiotherapist. That's where you get good care. We're so protective about that. If it's been defamed, we should be protective about it as far as driving that forwards as well. And the other part too is, you know, I might say to myself, you know, Bur's Physiotherapy or Bu's Physiotherapist is not a memorable name. And we mentioned in some of the previous webinars, is that you can in fact build that reputation. That name starts meaning something. And if you're in doubt about that, ask yourself about Deloitte and Touche as an accountant's firm. We know that it became a household name. And those aren't names that sort of roll off your tongue. Adams and Adams, we all associate that with IP lawyers, because that's what that brand means. And it starts carrying a name. And I think the third part to this is also that, you know, many people are saying, but, you know, once I retire, I close my practice, I'm a solus practice, and off I go. You can, in fact, build that name. I've worked at a practice, Retail and Partners, and I think it's going to be called Retail and Partners for generations to come, because it carries a title, it carries a name, it carries a meaning to it about what that means for rehabilitation. And as long as you leave permission for the new owners to continue to use your name, it can continue and have longevity long past the lifespan of any individuals who started that practice. Adams and Adams, I don't even know if they're around anymore or who they are, but that's the name that's carried, and we can do that. There's a lot of value in your name and in creating that brand and that awareness and an association to that.
I think, Dion, I think for me, you've just touched on the golden thing. So I specialize in crisis communications for my sins. I don't know what I did in a past life, but anyway, crisis communications are it for me a lot of the time. But it all comes back to reputation and capital. And you're so right that that you might not necessarily, you know, Dion Pierce physiotherapist, but if you were to do something wrong, everyone would know who you were. Yeah. So I always call it the reputation cookie jar, so, or the piggy bank. So, you know, you're going to have the way to if you have it, you need to build up the cookie jar, and then as soon as something happens, one cookie comes out. But if you've got no cookies in there, you've got nothing to but and everything's gone. So how do you build that reputation capital? And that is about building value in your business, and it goes down to what you stand for. So what does your practice, what do you stand for? So even if it's just you in your practice, what do you stand for? And that starts from I'm an old-fashioned marketing communications. So everything starts with the message for me. So what is the message that you think that you're giving out that people are receiving? Do you know what you're doing? You do as a business? Do people know what you do as a business? And are they the same thing? So something simple as a perception audit. So and ask your friends and family, ask clients, ask your staff if you've got staff. Okay, what is it you think that, you know, what is it that we do here? And try to get to the basics. And then you'll start building a messaging matrix. And then you can do a messaging audit. Do those messages work? Don't they work? And as Nicola will confirm here, is that over sort of 90% of the clients that we actually work with, whenever we do a messaging workshop or an audit, what they think they do and what they are doing are completely different.
Different things.
Yeah, very much so.
Yes, it's so important too. I mean, my experience, I'm just trying to reflect what it was. I've sold a car recently, so it's been insurers, and it's been, I think it was insurance, in fact, yes. It was an insurance house. And calling them, you can actually pick it up if you've got an incredibly good physiotherapist, occupational therapist, psychologist, who carries a certain essence, a brand, even a personal brand. But if that's not carried through to the rest of the practice, you kind of get this disjoint. Now you phone the receptionist, you go, oh no, is this really the same practice? Because that messaging is not coming through. You can actually hear that the receptionist is not aware of the brand, what the value add is, what defines that practice, and what makes them unique, and what the value add is. And it's important that that message carries right through to all the staff. So I think very often we forget that the first contact of a practice is usually the person who answers the phone or your website. That's their first experience. And that has to reflect what their experience is going to be through that journey, all the way out to, you know, receiving your account and somebody following up on an account. What is that essence of the practice, and how do you distill that right through? We often forget to internally communicate and market as well.
And your internal audiences are your number one advocates for what you do. They're the ones that are going to go home and tell their other half and their friends what kind of a day they've had. And then they're going to share it on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram or whatever story they're going to be using or platform. And that's how it works in this day and age. But talking of websites, and I think it even goes goes before you build a website, hey, Nicola, as in the email address, which is a bugbear for us as well.
Why is that?
I think, Lani, is it all right if I share a slide quickly, which I think might be useful? It's a bit of theory, but I think it might be helpful to everyone understand how you start building a brand, because you're probably sitting at home or in the office thinking, this is all very good and well, but where do I start? What are the first steps? How do I approach this? So let me just 1 second. Share my screen. Okay. So this is with our clients, a very simple tool that you can start working with. It's 3 layers of the onion. As Kaz and Dion were saying, you know, the most successful brands build their brand from the inside out. That's where they start. They don't start on the external stuff. They start right at the beginning. What is the core? And the core is your proposition. So your proposition is a single thought or phrase which you seek to own in the mind of the consumer, right? So that's where you begin. Then your next layer is the product. So what are your product values? What are the things that you are offering to your client, to your customer? Just keep it simple. And then after that is your personality. So what are the things that define you, your values, how you communicate? And maybe an example is, just to bring it to life a bit. So I just made this up at the top of my head, but it might just help illustrate it. If you were, for instance, a dietitian, right? Your proposition could be around unlocking health for your patients. Your values could be around innovation, so always employing like the latest and greatest in terms of dietetics, collaboration, working with your client, working with other practitioners, and then integrity in terms of, you know, that goes without saying in a lot of ways. Then your personality, the last layer, could be, for instance, friendly, accessible, and vibrant. And this is how your brand displays to the outside world. So you've got to start from the inside, work out. You can't do it the other way around. And the personality is the stuff that you can see. It's how you talk to your patients. It's what your collateral looks like. It's how you recruit your staff. It's all that kind of stuff. It's the experience, the customer touch points. So this is maybe just an interesting thing to think about. How does your practice fit into this, and how could you start putting some words and phrases around this that has meaning for you?
And once you've done that, once you've actually sort of started to build those layers, then you'll start to get a real sense of who you are and what you are and how others are perceiving it. So, and then you can start building the tools or the collateral that you need to actually take that to market. And even if you are an established practice already, which most of you are, the majority of you are, there's still a lot that can be done to actually refresh, be more on point to that, because let's bring it back to 2020. It's been a long, hard year for everyone.
That's for sure.
So it's an opportunity to actually refresh and things. So do the exercise, start thinking about it. So what does your reception look like? Does your reception resonate? Even if you're at home, does it carry through a color theme? Do you have one? Your email address, for example. So if you have a practice name, so let's use Dion with his kind permission, dionbeurs@gmail.com or at telcomsa.net. Change that. Make it dion@dionbeurs.co.za. Dion at Dion's physiotherapist. or Eat Right at, or Kathy at Eat Right Dietitians. So that your domain name, your URL, so if you have other people in your practice, they will also be using that. And even if it's just 2 people or yourself in that practice, you could have payments at Dion Burs Physiotherapist. It might be you sending that, but actually creating another layer, an email address, which all goes to your same inbox anyway. So you're not doubling the work and having to inboxes. But what you're doing is creating the perception, the impression that you are professional, okay, that this is, and that you are a business. And that helps you stand out. That's just a simple trick.
But Kaz, what I'm hearing from you now is with all these things that you're going to try and put in place, what that does with the patient or the client who's going to visit your practice or email or communicate with them, it elicits a certain emotion with that person. And this is a quality, practice or a business. They know what they're doing. They know what they're talking about. And I think there always needs to be a story or an emotion that's connecting you to a certain, whether it's the healthcare provider or the practice itself. But at the end of the day, you connect with the brand of that practice.
Yeah.
Go Nick.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Lani, you're spot on. People are, this is quite an old statistic, but I'm sure it's probably double or triple now. But people are exposed to over 5,000 brands every day. Yes. So it doesn't matter what your product is, what your service is, you need to connect with your audience. The only way you can really connect with your audience and get cut through, which is what we have to do, is to elicit an emotional response. And that's what it comes down to. And that's what your brand, when you put the time and effort into developing it, that's what it can deliver for you. It will get, it comes down to cut through. Who's listening to you? What are you saying about yourself? And how are people engaging with you?
Is it worth getting a little tagline or a catchphrase for your practice?
Definitely. That's one of those little elements that, again, it's an emotional response that people can connect with. If you have a very dry name, for instance, that's a very, no disrespect, like Dion was talking about that example. It gives people a reason to believe, something else to connect with. I think it's an excellent idea, definitely.
So using Dion as an example again. So sorry, Dion, you're going to be here. You're it today. When you search, so we'll get to digital in a moment, but when you search for Dion Burs physiotherapist online, do you even come up? Does that even, so that's all about search engine optimization, keywords, meta tagging, things, and we'll unpack a little bit of that later. But when you do come up, it could come up with something that says Dion Burs physiotherapist, but there's a tagline that says walk tall or something like that. So you're associating your practice with what you do. So so it could be walk tall. It could be something, it's just something off the spur of the moment. But try to think of something that's 2-3 words max, because otherwise, that search bar just gets a little bit long. But that starts to help your ranking, because people might start thinking of that easier, because that's
sort of actually association.
Yeah. So that relates to actually why they're looking for a physiotherapist in the first place.
I think if I can just come in there, maybe, Lani, is that obviously just looking at HPCSA regulations specifically in this example, is that we have to be obviously very cognizant of the regulation around naming of practice and marketing and making your professional services known. I just want to relate to those. I think it was 3 or 4 weeks ago that we had that one. But it's really important that you look at that, because it's important that even, what did you say? Walking tall.
Walk tall, yeah.
Walk tall. I think, I know it was a spur of a moment example, but it's such a good one, because if I'm working in rehabilitation of spinal cord injured patients, that tagline could be misleading. Yeah, because none of my patients are going to walk again. And it's such a true example. We in fact had one of the hospitals we worked at had an image of a patient in a wheelchair, and then sort of a stopgap, almost animation of this person standing up and then walking out of the chair, which is really good, but not everybody gets that. Not everyone does rehabilitate to walk again. And so that could be construed as misleading or causing unwarranted anxiety or distress is one of the taglines, that one of the important lines that were in the regulation. So we have to constantly look at that, as well as the name. I mean, I love the Kaz's example of saying, reiterate your brand name through your email addresses and the handles that go through that, and different people that are operating. But again, make sure that that name, your URL for your website and all of that complies with the regulator, as far as, because you can't be saying, administration at bestrehabintown.com. That is again comparative advertising and so on. So be careful about what you choose there, and make sure that name is appropriate right through.
In fact, when it comes to claims, one has to be very careful about everything. And in fact, as a layperson looking for something, if it says best physiotherapist in town, I'm probably going to move on past anyway, because
exactly says you.
Yeah, because, yeah. But then you look at the reviews, and that's where your message is so important, because you want people to say the right things about you, because once those reviews are up there, it's difficult to get them off.
But Kaz, this is a completely different topic now, and I think we need to sort of unpack it a little bit more, because everyone's got the ability to leave reviews these days. If you're on a digital platform, you're searchable on Google, and there might be negative reviews. You can't ignore it. You can't turn a blind eye. Surely you need to address those.
I think actually that's a minefield all of its own. That's a massive topic. But I think one has to be very careful about how you respond on social media, whether it is a formal review of something, because then you respond and you take each and every single case on its own merits. When dealing in this space, there is no blanket approach to these matters. If it's a very serious one, then obviously you would pick up the phone, you'd engage directly with that person, then you would make a note on social media, say to respond, say thank you very much for your review. We have been in touch with you, or we'd like to be in touch with you, so that so you're engaging, so that you are seen to be an engaging brand, and you try and resolve it offline. The idea is to take it offline and resolve it, and then you can always post back, or somebody can post back later to say this was resolved. And that's that's the result you want, it was resolved. So I handled a case not too long ago, actually. It was a law firm who actually engaged me to assist them, and they had a business rescue practice who had represented a particular business. And the business rescue practitioner he's very well respected, so he's not a fly-by-night, he has a very successful practice, looked at her business and where she was. She had a single client, which was a government tender client, unfortunately, and her business was not going to make it because it was a single thing. So he recommended liquidation. Unfortunately, he also had a law firm, and she decided to post very negative comments that are completely against our Constitution and Bill of Rights on this, and on Facebook, and then refused to take them down. Then Facebook refused to take them down. So this is now all playing out in the public. So the way it was handled is we engaged on Facebook, we respected that, and then we took it offline. Then that didn't work, and Facebook decided it wasn't get involved, so we took Facebook to court. It's the first successful case of suing Facebook, and before we actually got to court, Facebook removed the thing, but that doesn't happen very often. So the most important thing is to do it case by case, react fast. That's the other thing. Don't bury your head in the sand and be honest. Be honest. We all make mistakes. It's important to acknowledge if we are at fault. And if you don't know the answer to something, say, don't actually have the answer to it, but I will find out and I will come back to you, but make sure you do.
I think that's one of the challenges that we have to think about before taking, because we all think that taking our practices, marketing and so on onto a public platform is only sunshine and roses. But you got to be able to take the good with the bad. And I think that's the challenge that people need to just pause at before they say, I'm going to start a Facebook page for my practice. That's all good and well. You're going to share the good. Some patients might respond back and say, never got any benefit. I wouldn't recommend this physio. And you're going to have to deal with that. But to then audit those and take out the negatives and only show the positives is also not truthful. So I think it's important that you handle both the good and the bad and handle that professionally in that public space. If you're going to step into it, you've got to be able to handle that.
So Mark asked a question. Sorry, Nicola. Mark asked a question. Any recommendations for a good website or way for clients to post reviews? Is it actually a good idea for healthcare providers? So the answer to that from me, and I'm sure my learned colleague will have another take on this as well, is that the best place for reviews is on your own website as well, because when people are going to look for you, they're going to look at your website, and then you can't, as I understand it, have paid for endorsement. So they are all real reviews from people. That for me would be the best place.
And you've obviously got control over your own website.
Correct. Yeah.
I think those, just to add what Dion and Kaz have been saying, is I think, a lot of our clients have been reluctant to go onto social media for this very issue. But you need to be there because that's where people are going to try and find you. People do their research now. They go and look for your website. They go and see what your social media looks like. Do you have a thought leadership? Do you have a particular view in terms of your practice and your discipline? What are you all about? And if you're not there, then you might lose them. So as Dion was saying, it's about managing it. Obviously, if you don't feel very confident, then in terms of not getting good reviews, then that's a whole nother kettle of fish. But I'm sure if you're part of this audience today, I'm sure that's not going to be an issue. But I think also those review websites, a lot of the times it's very negative because that's where people go to lash out. That's where people generally, just human nature, they generally don't go and leave a lovely review. They go because they're angry and they want to share it with the world. So I wouldn't necessarily engage in those platforms too much. But things like your own website, developing a Google business profile, and just, there's nothing wrong with asking your clients or your patients, do you mind leaving a review on my Facebook page? Do you mind leaving a review on my Google business page? People are more than happy to do it. And it's just a really nice kind of social proof. And it all helps. It really does.
And you're obviously only going to ask those patients who you feel comfortable with and who you know is going to leave a positive review.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's marketing, right? Yeah.
Perhaps just the last question on this topic, and it's a question from Sean. How do you deal with false reviews? So let's say you've never seen a certain patient, but he or she wrote a really negative review about your practice. How do you deal with that?
A completely false one. Well, that's libelous for a start, but and slanderous. So if try to track them down and try and call them and explain and say, I've seen this review, but I've never actually seen you in my practice. Could we try to get to the bottom of it? And then, so you have to remember that we've got to be human. So I know it's so easy today to just jump onto email, blah, 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 but actually sometimes a phone call, an actual voice that you can actually speak to and hear, because because people hide behind words and hide behind digital. Pick up the phone, and you're talking to them, makes it more personal for a start. Then try to get the bottom of it. If they're not doing that, well, then you can always post and say, I have not seen this. I have not seen this person. Very concerned, blah. And then you can issue them with a formal letter to say this is what, and you can threaten that way, which is obviously the last route to go, because we tried conciliation beforehand. But there's no such thing as a private comment on a public platform.
True, very true. So we're talking about a few touch points, whether it's a phone call or an email or just reaching out to a client. I mean, that all forms part of the customer journey. And let's talk about something a bit more positive. And let's unpack the customer journey a little bit, because surely there's a lot of touch points and you need to keep on engaging with your member. Is that important, would you say, as part of your brand and building your brand?
Absolutely. In fact, we've got a slide.
Could I share another slide?
You may.
You're so prepared, Nicola. How did you know she was going to ask that? You prepared the slides and everything.
It's when we know each other.
We're fortune tellers, Dion. That's what marketing people do.
So this kind of builds on what I was showing earlier in terms of the onion, starting with the proposition, the values, all that good stuff. And this is how you can actually execute it across those customer touch points that Lani was talking about. So your brand sits in the middle, and this just shows very clearly it's everything. It informs, or can inform, every single part of your customer touch point and customer journey. So starting with your visual identity, your marketing collateral, your content, website, advertising. If you have any kind of, probably not CSI, but any kind of philanthropic work that you do as well, sponsorship, digital, it goes on and on, recruitment, your PR, your messaging, partnerships. There's just, that should really be the core that informs what those messages and what that strategy around each of those elements looks like.
Just in terms of this particular slide, so when we look at things for clients, there are 3 types of media. There's owned media, which is the media you own, and that is your website, it's your practice, what it looks like, so your reception, your staff, where you dress, your identity, your physical identity, that's your owned media. Even your WhatsApp picture, if you've got a professional WhatsApp number, the logo, the tools, the mediums that you use, that you own. Then there's paid for media, and paid for media is generally advertising. That's where you pay to put an advert, or you pay to have an article. And then there's earned media, and that's the media that you earn from either writing a newsworthy release that you send to market, submitting a thought leadership piece, an opinion piece, or where you've been asked for comment, or even in this case, a webinar where you are invited to do something. That's earned exposure. So and the earned media, which is mostly the space that I play in our partnership, is that I look at the ways to get our clients into other avenues, so editorially. So looking at crafting a voice for them in a particular channel. So in the healthcare space, for example, writing a piece around mental health and actually having that on a platform like Media24, as one of our colleagues in this space has done or did during COVID. Writing a piece about telehealth, those are the sort of things that get picked up by other media. So even in your practice, in your town, you will have channels that you can actually use. So like community media. So contributing an article to your local community newspaper. And that is simply picking up, sorry, someone is actually going to walk into my office shortly and doesn't know I'm on a webinar. This is called a crisis interruption. So you could actually get hold of your local community newspaper, your writer, your editors, because they're actually in the newspaper. Find out how to get hold of them. There's usually an email. And then you can drop them a line and say, this is who I am. I have a thought-provoking article I'd like to share with our community. Would you carry it? And here it is. So, and they're looking for content, as well as advertisers. The same with a community radio station. Community radio stations are also looking for content. So you could, and they're more approachable. So start small. And that way you start to build a voice for yourself, and then you become recognizable. And I presume that would fit within the regulations, because you're not going to go out as an expert. It's your opinion, Dion.
Yeah. Good. I think you're reading my mind there. And I think what's also important is, I've done a few interviews, been on radio and that, and you're often perplexed because, you're going in there with your own personal kind of business. You're going in there with your practice. You're going in there with your own individual identity and brand. And then you're also going in as the profession. And I think when one finds yourself in those positions, my default is, and I think what's best for healthcare in general, is to go forwards as the profession. So if you're a dietitian and you've been invited on as a dietitian in your local community to speak on a radio platform, going forwards and saying, I'm here to speak about dietetics and what it can do for patients and the role of a dietitian in diabetes. So you're neutralizing it away from yourself and you're speaking as somebody who is a dietitian, speaking from experience and putting your profession forward and driving that profession forwards. You'll be doing yourself a favor and all of your colleagues. And I think that's really where the value lies. When you're doing a brochure that says, this is the value of occupational therapy in managing low muscle tone children. And I'm sure there's a newer name for that. Apologies, I've been out of clinical work for some time. But managing that, this is the role of occupational therapy. Yes, here's my contact details should you want to contact me, but there's also the contact details for the association to find the occupational therapist closest to you. There you're doing a service to the profession as a whole, and you're putting your practice forward. You're taking that initiative. So I'd always lean it that way, especially when it comes to things like radio interviews.
I think especially on your website, you can really promote a discipline as well, or a specific profession, and not just what you as a OT or a bio or a podiatrist can do, but what can podiatry do? What can occupational therapy, do to a certain condition, et cetera, et cetera. So I think that's very, very helpful.
Yeah.
I think in that, I think the healthcare world is as competitive as any other business that we work with. And there's always this fear of, I'm giving it all away. I need to keep it and own it for myself. Well, that's changed an awful lot because there's an awful lot more people. There's access to more, I think. So to be a champion for your discipline, be a champion for what you do, because that changes people's perception of you.
Yeah.
If you go out with this fear-based thing that gets communicated through what you're saying and doing, and then people are not going to come back to you or not going to get to you in the first place. Whereas if you go out with confidence and authority as part of the industry, not only are you building the industry itself and giving the industry a voice, you're building your own value and your own reputational capital.
Sure. But Kaz, Nicola, surely you want to retain your patients, and obviously you want a loyal following of patients. What's the touch points that you can use, like physically use, to keep in touch with your patients, especially now where you don't see people very often face to face? You might need to keep engaging with them via different platforms and avenues. What would you propose?
It's, for me, if I can jump in there, it starts with getting to know them well. So I always think relationship marketing is like dating. Ask them questions, actually care. You can't want to build a relationship that's not just based around a one-way need. They have, I delivered to whatever service they need until they have that need again. Because you want them, South Africa has, interesting stat, out of all the countries in the world, we rely on word of mouth as a marketing tool more than any other country in the world. So how you treat your patients or your clients is critical, not just because it's the right thing to do, but because you want to engender a sense of goodwill, a sense of loyalty. It's not so they're coming back to you and not anyone else, but because they tell their friends, because they've had such a great experience. And it comes back to that brand story that we're saying that weaves through. It comes down to your values. So what are the values that you're bringing to your patient or client through the experience with you? So obviously there's the interaction with whatever treatment it could be, but capture information that you know about them. So build a database. Obviously you'd know their birthday. What are their children's names? Where do they live? All this kind of stuff. So for instance, something very simple you can do, it's their birthday, send them an email, just let them know that you care, and that you genuinely care. I mean, that's something that you can't really fake. So just do what comes naturally. And I think it's just around creating a sense of community as well. So you can do that also on your social media platforms, on your website, starting to obviously, Dion might have a regulation view on this, but whether you can share testimonials and success stories of people. Whether you're allowed to do that, I'm not sure, but that's also a great way to show that, you know, people aren't alone. There's other, you know, fantastic case studies that they can also, you know, take inspiration from in their own health journey, whatever that might be.
Yeah.
Yeah, can
Absolutely.
you share testimonials on a website?
Yeah,
With
I think
patient consent?
there is, I don't know if that's me ringing like that. I think it's Christmas bells or something, but yeah, the testimonials is interesting. There are two schools of thought around that. The one where one can personally filter those and put those up. I think firstly, don't carry the authenticity that one would want from testimonials that patients are willingly putting up. I think it's also important that we don't, as Kaz said before, pay somebody to do that. That you're incentivizing them to put up a certain testimonial, filtering those, and then also not encouraging the patients to actually use comparative advertising approaches to say, man, I went to Dion and he is the best physiotherapist in town. There is no better. Now, you're putting that on your website, you're filtering that, you're paying for their coffee or whatever. I think that's what we need to be avoiding. But I can't help it if somebody goes onto my Google Places site and says, I've had a phenomenal experience. And really, if it comes to, you know, managing this condition, you know, that's great. I appreciate that. And I'm going to take the good with the bad there. So I'm not filtering that, and I'm not incentivizing that kind of response. So I think that's important to keep in mind. But I think just another thing that Nicola's touching on here, which is so important, is we often say people don't remember what you say, they remember what you do. But it actually goes a step further. People don't always remember what you do, they remember how you made them feel.
Yeah.
That entrenches a memory. And if you sit here and just think about what has been memorable over this last week, these 4 days feel like they've been one day. But the things that are going to come back are linked to emotion. Somebody who made you feel bad, somebody who made you feel really good. Those are the memorable things that we think back on. And if your healthcare journey, your journey to seeking healthcare, not taking care of me because I'm sick or labeling me as a sick person, I'm a diabetic patient, that's not what I want. That's not who I am. I might be somebody who has diabetes, and there's a difference. And somebody who's looking at a way of managing that, getting on the front foot, empowering me. Those are the things that people remember and what your role is in that. So I think we must relook at our messaging as well, and making sure that we're treating people, not sicknesses, and that we are working towards health care, not sick care. All of that forms part of your messaging and forms part of how you inadvertently make a patient feel and what they remember about your practice. And it goes there's even another side. I've got a colleague who decided she's going to brand her practice, and she took it all the way to not just how it looks, how it feels, how it's balanced, you know, your perceptions as you go in, but she even took it to the smell of the practice. And she decided, my practice is going to smell of lemons. And she made a conscious effort to always have that. And you can imagine how that makes patients feel. They firstly got a familiarity every time they're coming in, but they're going to smell lemon somewhere else, and that's immediately going to take them back and go, sure, I should be seeing my physio.
That's incredible. But listen, we're talking about so many touch points and communicating with your patients on, you know, via different platforms. Obviously, there's collateral involved here, whether it's an invoice, a business card, the way that your WhatsApp looks like. Is it important to have it all structured in more or less the same way, or the same look and feel at least?
I'm going to leave that firmly to Nicola.
Sure. Absolutely. When it's not consistent, you're diluting your voice in market. So when your brand is consistent and clear, you speak with a louder voice. So even if it's something as simple as your WhatsApp profile, your email signature, all these little touch points need to be worked together, because then you have a stronger voice and people remember you more. So it's very simple, but yeah, 100%. Consistency is king.
So consistency of the message, but you don't have to be same across everything. You can have tiny little sort of iterations that, you know, to make it fresh or to keep it alive and inject it with some energy, so long as that key theme runs through everything. That there's this, otherwise you could start looking a little schizophrenic. You know,
just dealing with a different practice every time.
I think the balance there, though, is that you want to keep it fresh and different. But, you know, I've seen some guys coming with brochures and saying, this is the brochure for my practice. What do you think about this? And my dear wife is in design, and she's saying, you know, every time you have some change in your content, it's another piece of information. So, you know, starting with a font, and your header is in one font, and then the body's in a different font, and then the font size changes, and then the color changes. Every time that's happening, it's more information, and it's actually part of the messaging, and that starts getting noisy, and you start missing the actual core of the messaging. So I think also keeping it simple, getting the message across crisply and cleanly is important. And, you know, even PowerPoint presentations, I think we've all been in those where, you know, they go to the next slide and there's this animated whoosh that happens, and that's all fine. You start getting used to that, but then the next one's a different whoosh, and eventually you're looking at whooshes and you're not actually even looking at the content on the slides. It's distracting. It might be amazing while you're preparing, but for the recipient, it's distracting. So make sure that the message isn't drowned out by the noise that we sometimes think looks nice or adds other value, when in fact it's diluting your message.
So because we are so digitally bound these days, and it's always been a true statement, a picture speaks 1,000 words. So look at the imagery that you can use in your practice to depict what it is that you do. And then short, sharp, powerful sentences, not an essay, because people don't have time to read anymore. It's a very sad fact. I still very much like the feel of paper and books between my fingers, but I also consume news online all the time. But a picture stands out, and a short sentence, captions, those are key. And that goes right back to where we started this webinar. Go back to your messaging. What is the message all about? What is it that you do? And then what is it you want people to understand what you do? And what do they actually understand that you do? So you can try and marry it and get it simple. It's got to be simple to communicate, to effect, to receive, and to retain. So yeah.
Guys, just talk a little. Sorry, Nicola, go for it first.
Yeah, I was just going to add to Kaz's comment there, is that there's often the temptation to try and put everything into your communication and your collateral, and it's not necessary. We see this often with our clients, that we just, particularly with web copy, we'll get their web copy, cut it by 50%, then cut it by 50% again, and then it's still too much. So just think about, as Kaz was saying, what do you want them to understand about you? Not what do you want to say? Two subtle but very different things. And yeah, avoid the temptation to try and cram it all in there, because it doesn't work.
And don't be shy to share it with your family. If your target audience is primary school kids, take it to primary school kids and see if they understand it. I think us as healthcare practitioners become so versed in our new language. We have this language to say non-mechanical low back pain, and these things come naturally to us. But what on earth does that mean? I'm not a mechanic. Why? I don't get my back pain from that. We got to be sure that we're actually communicating, and that only happens when I give a message across and it's played back to me, and it's actually a consistent message. So go to your target audience and propose that. Tell them, what does this mean to you? Take it to your family members and take it to your colleagues to say, what are your thoughts on this? Before I go and print 10,000 brochures, let's make sure that the message is clear and it is actually coming across.
Nicola and I had a chat yesterday, and this is something that Nicola particularly is very passionate about, and me too. It's not about you, it's about them. So it's not about what you want your brand, it's what your brand can do for everyone else. It's them, not you.
Very true, very true. We've got a few minutes left, and I just want to circle back to a bit of digital conversation. We spoke about you need to be able to find someone on Google, Yahoo, etc. But Kaz, I think right at the start, you mentioned SEO and meta tagging. Do you just want to explain to the audience a little bit more about that?
So in a nutshell, you need a degree to do SEO properly, but never mind, but you can do basics. So search engine optimization. What is it you can do with your website to come up in the rankings where you're not necessarily paying for advertising? So this goes back to a little bit around earned media. Meta tagging are keywords that you've identified through a keyword search that resonate with your practice and with you. These are words that you can start to own. So in the case of Dion Bios, physiotherapist, It could be, you can't own the word physiotherapist, but that's a keyword. So long as you put that into your first line copy or the first 3 lines, because that's where Google looks for its rankings. So if we're writing web copy straight for the website, we'll make sure that your message is in the first, in the title and the first 3 lines to start with. And then every single new piece of copy that you put onto your website, like a blog, for example, and I know that you're all very busy professionals, and your job is to treat people who need healthcare. But just to take half an hour once a week to sit down and write a blog, because it will help focus your mind and focus your business and focus on your discipline. So in your blog, you come up with a title that's catchy, that you research has not been used before on Google, because often I see that too. You'll come up with this amazing title, and that's because you've seen it somewhere. So you need to come up with your own. And you create the title, write a blog, and the first 3 lines are where people go anyway, but that's how Google will also start looking at it. And you put in some of your keywords, not all of them, that you've identified, and start doing that. And that will start moving your website up, because you're engaging with your own website. So when people come to look for you, that's a very, 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 very simple overview. Nicola, have you got anything to add on that?
I think another fairly easy thing to do is to cross-pollinate your content. So if you've got something on social media, send them through to your website for more information, because then Google is seeing that as valuable and will also help pick up your organic rankings. So wherever possible, just keep people in your ecosystem and push them around where you can, if that makes sense.
So would you say it's important to be on Google, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn? Is that what you mean with a cross-pollination?
Yeah, so you know, be on as many digital platforms as you can manage, prioritize the ones that you can manage well, and get to the other ones when you can. I would say for me, the essentials are: have a LinkedIn profile that's active, that you're sharing articles, that you're commenting on, that you have your own point of view that comes across. Have a website, even if it's a 1-pager, people need to be able to find you. And set up your Google business profile. Start with those 3 touch points, do them well, add content, as Kaz said, keep adding to it. That means that when people try and find a physiotherapist in Pretoria, they're going to more than likely find you over someone else. And I know the competition thing is a tricky thing, but at the end of the day, we are in the business of getting patients. So, and they must be able to find us when they're looking for us.
Lonnie, I think the question by Farina actually ties into this as well. So we'll just answer that live. But he's just asking, can you have 2 domain names that lead to the same website? And absolutely, I think that's a nice way to catch through as well. Is you might have burzphysiotherapist.co.za, and if I'm interested in cardiopulmonary rehabilitation, I might have the site cardiopulmonaryrehabilitation.com, and either one will actually still come to the same website. You can resolve those to go to the master website, which one can do. Again, just be sure that there's nothing that contravenes the naming of practice or naming of your service, as well as the marketing and making professional services known regulation in your domain names as well. So I think that's very important for him.
Excellent.
Yeah, all these linking and these sites, these channels, there's a lot of them out there. The golden rule, though, is if you're going to be on them, again, it's the consistency, but be regular with what you're doing. So don't start something that you're not going to finish or contribute to on a regular basis, because that actually is going to do you more harm in the long run, because people are going, oh, they've gone out of business.
Yeah, there's nothing worse than going on a website that says latest news, and then it's like September 2017. I mean, rather take the thing down, right? Yeah.
Oh, listen, I am just watching the clock, and we are very quickly running out of time. I will circle back to all of you just for some closing remarks, but just quickly again to the audience, just remember all our webinars are available on different platforms. I'm literally pasting all the URLs in the chat functionality. You can just copy and paste it there for your own reference at a bit of a later stage, and it's available on our EZMed.solutions website as well. Nicola, Kaz, let's start with you two. Maybe Nicola, you go first, just a short summary, and then Kaz will hand over to you and Dion can finish.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you everyone for, your time today. I hope it's been a good hour invested. I would say, coming to the end of the year, everyone's feeling pretty tired, but for us, this is a great time to spring clean. Look at your brand, look at your messaging, look at your communications, your collateral. And if you can, spend a bit of time just reevaluating through the lens that we've outlined today and see how can you start January with a new spring in your step in terms of what your brand is and how you display it to your patients. If you can, do the groundwork now.
Thanks, Nicola. Kaz?
I don't really have much more to add to that. Although, you know me, I can talk forever, but I think the most important thing is to believe in yourself. So if you believe in yourself and what you're doing, that will communicate itself through your brand as well. And try to make that come out, that you care. I think we're moving into a whole paradigm of community, collaboration, partnership. That's the other way that you can use to actually grow your brand, is look for collaborations, smart collaborations, smart ways to help each other, and to help everyone. And then carry that through the messaging, carry that through every touch point. And just have a good rest, everyone, and a good festive season.
If anyone wants to reach out and maybe make contact to either Kaz or Nicola, is it okay if I post your email addresses in the chat functionality?
Absolutely.
Perfect. You can get it there.
Don't look for networks. We do not have a website, though.
The mechanic whose own car is not running, huh?
Oh, goodness.
There is
you don't
a
need
story.
to advertise. It's word of mouth. It's carrying you.
Word of mouth. You said it. Dion, I'm going to leave the last message to you, and perhaps you can just say something about the last 6 months as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I think firstly, these two ladies are being very humble. They've been the powerhouse behind, together with Lani, the drive of EZMed and the marketing campaigns across all the different platforms. So I want to just say thank you to Kaz and Nicola. Thank you so much for your efforts and the expertise you've brought to it. And I think part of that is just, I don't think I'd go, with all due respect to Kaz or Nicola, if I needed physiotherapy services. That's what I'm good at. That's what I'm trained at. But we very often think as healthcare providers that we are also good legal people. We are good accountants. We're good marketers. And there's time that you need to lean on the experts and go to them and let them assist you and guide you through that. Just remember your regulation. You can't give them free rein. You are still ultimately responsible to ensure that where you are utilizing marketing services, that it remains within the guidelines of your regulator. So be sure you do that. But yeah, I think there's a lot to do. I think we should get more bold about our advertising and marketing. I think we need to get out there on the front foot as healthcare practitioners, and step into the 21st century when it comes to doing that. And with the help of the likes of yourselves, I think we can do that very effectively. So thanks again, and thanks for joining us. And reflecting over the last 6 months, Lani, it's been an incredible journey. This was birthed out of COVID and people being isolated and feeling alone. This was birthed out of me getting multiple calls on a day, where after I closed the call, I realized, but they weren't even asking for an answer. It was just, let's reach out and talk. Let's share our thinking. Let's share our challenges. Let's share our frustrations. Let's share our opportunities. And that really birthed the webinar. And we've gone from strength to strength on numbers. It's really so great having so many of you with us week after week, setting this as your regular Thursday at 4 o'clock. Our Tuesdays with Maury has become Thursdays at 4 o'clock with EZMed. And we've had the greats. We've had the Health Professions Council here, Dr. Michael Mole we've had here, the CEO from Netcare, Richard Friedland. We've had some great names, and it's really been wonderful sharing this platform with thought leaders and standing on the shoulders of giants. So we appreciate everyone's contribution, everyone for being here with us and walking this journey. We will be back early next year, so watch the space. And we really look forward to continuing to move forwards and just creating a forum, a platform that we can share ideas and thinking and tackle this all together. So, and Lani, thank you to you. You've really been an anchor to all of this and inspirational. So thank you so much for taking point on it.
Thanks, Dion. It's my pleasure. We really don't want any of the attendees to become strangers. So if you do want to keep in touch, please use our info@profnetmedical.co.za email address. I literally just posted it in the chat functionality for you to copy and paste. And I just want to leave everyone with a lasting thought. And I think it's something that Jeff Bezos from Amazon said, and it's about brand. And he said, your brand is what other people say about you when you're not in the room. So what are your patients and what are your employees saying about you and your business when you're leaving or when they go away from your healthcare business? Something to think about maybe over the holiday season. Don't spend too much time on it, but I do wish everyone an incredibly wonderful festive season. I hope you all get to rest a little bit. I know it's very often difficult for healthcare professionals to take leave over the holiday season, but wherever you are, whatever you're doing, please be safe for you and your family, as we really hope to see you back again next year, perhaps even in person. Who knows? Kaz, Nicola, Dion, thank you again for today. Sorry we overran a little bit. I see everyone is actually still on the webinar, the majority of people. But thanks again from me. And just to all the attendees, take care, everyone, and we'll see you next year.
Excellent. Thank you, Lonnie. Thank
Bye-bye.
you, Kaz. Thank you, Nicola.
Thank you so much.
Cheers, guys.